And we oftentimes assume that, okay, yeah, I finished college, I did all this great work, and so boom, I've arrived, I'm done. No, actually, you're just beginning.
Today's guest is Dr. Nadege Dady, a trailblazer in medical education and student advocacy. She's the first female and first African American Dean of Students at Touro College of Osteopathic Medicine, Harlem campus, where she spent over a decade championing diversity, wellness, and academic success. From leading national accreditation efforts to mentoring the next generations of physicians, Dr. Dady brings both heart and leadership to everything she does. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Dr. Dady.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Palmerton. I'm excited to discuss this with you today.
How did your journey lead you to become the first female and first African American dean at Touro Com Harlem? And what has this meant to you both personally and professionally?
So my journey really sort of consisted of a lot of prior work in the higher education space. I started out in a healthcare nonprofit sector where I learned really a lot about the behind the scenes issues impacting both physicians and public health. And that's where I really learned about some of the social movement that physicians are involved in to really make healthcare more accessible and better for their patients. My next journey led me into academia. While I was in dentistry, I learned about the corporate structure of higher education, really everything impacting sort of funding requirements, research, data development. And I just continued to develop my skills with some additional schooling. I went back to school for my doctorate because higher education in some of the spaces, it requires you to really have a terminal degree. And really all those activities, all the years of hard work and continuous development led me to Thorcom Harlem, sort of fortuitously. I started teaching there. And then later there was this position that opened within student affairs, and the rest is history, as they say. But a lot of the prior work really involved fine-tuning my skills, learning about all of the things that are impacting both higher education, public health, and of course in the background was healthcare. So I hope I answered that appropriately for you.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I'm curious, you talked about like kind of learning about the corporate structure sort of behind the curtain. There's a lot of people that don't understand that. Like,
Mhm.
what is the thing that as you have sort of risen up the ranks behind the scenes that has been most sort of surprising, or things that something that you think students in medical school today would find most sort of insightful to understand?
Well, there is a lot. Actually, the reason why I mention that is because a lot of times, and that's really for any industry, someone can be outside of an industry looking in and thinking, "Oh, it's so easy to do what they do," or they can just say what they want to say, and that's not true. Because in higher ed, in particular, and sort of related to that research, there's a lot of forethought that goes into the work that is sort of collected and that informs decision making, that really leads some of the movements from one place to another. And so where that impacts students is that, especially as it relates to academic sort of progress, that things are very orderly. Some of the things that they would be extremely surprised about is that, it takes one step to get to the next. So things grades have to be collected, data has to be reviewed, and it feeds a certain amount of decision making that helps higher education administrators make decisions about who gets to progress, what are the things that require some review, what are the things that have to be redone. And so I only mentioned that because it was just as surprising for me as you mentioned it, with that, wow, there's an entire behind the scenes activity that feeds some of the work that gets done. And that's in a lot of ways a good thing. Some people might think that bureaucracy is too much, and in some ways it can be, but um, for things that are as heavy as medicine, education, academic progress, we really do want that level of scrutiny. You want that level of um, a cautious decision making, is what I would say.
Interesting. What would be like a benefit that a student might not recognize that comes from that structure and that system?
One of the most important benefits, in my opinion, is that there's the groundwork for policies that feed decision making across the board, so that a person can't just make a decision about one student. Right? There has to be a consistent policy of how you deal with things like academic grading, academic progress, um, things like curricula. So that's really actually to the benefit of every student, is to know that there is that sort of process in place.
You've worked with students from all walks of life, including many from underrepresented backgrounds and non-traditional backgrounds. How does imposter syndrome tend to show up in the students that you serve?
So first, I mean, imposter syndrome is really, I like to define it beforehand so that we make sure we're all talking about the same thing, is really sort of this internal dialogue that makes the person who's experiencing it feel like they don't belong somewhere, or they don't have what it takes to make it, or they're in the wrong place, per se. Um, and one of the best ways that I connect with students is by connecting to my own experiences with imposter syndrome. And so not that it is a forced conversation, but if a student needs assistance with that, we can definitely talk about what's bringing it up, what is triggering it. And really, all the students that are in school, medical school, graduate professional school, are going through some level of trial that makes them think like, am I going to make it? And so really the constant sort of amongst all students is really keeping one foot in front of the other. So it's not that you're so special or so out of place that you can't do this. It's really recognizing what it is for what it is, which is an internal dialogue that is not based on anything. It's just fear, right? Looking at that fear, naming it for what it is, and then attacking the inappropriate thought behind it. So if I'm in class and I'm thinking, do I belong here? Sort of, it's an internal dialogue. Well, why do you think that? Why would you think that? This is an educational pathway that's open to all. Now, that does not mean that someone may not need real assistance with their academic study strategies, because that is a separate issue. But that doesn't mean that does not make you less qualified. Sometimes what it means is I need to change the way that I study from high school to college into medical school or graduate professional school, because all levels require different skill sets. So what got you through college may or may not be helpful in medical school or graduate school. So to review, it's really looking at that inappropriate thought, naming it what it is. It's a fear-based sort of reaction to something. And then really attacking it from the perspective of peeling back the layers, understanding what's real, what's false, what's made up, and then what's the strategy for dealing with it. And so there's a process for that, but it starts with a student recognizing where they are, what got them there, and what's triggering that fear. It's a human feeling. Everyone sort of experiences that.
So I remember my first day at Stanford for medical school, and I had taken a couple years off. I'd done a Fulbright in South Korea before I had gone to medical school, so I had not gone straight from college. And I was a chemistry major, and I'd gone to a smaller school that didn't have a lot of like sort of medicine type things. My first lecture, when I sat down, I literally was like, I don't belong here. Like I remember that feeling, like I should not have come back. Like I deferred for 2 years. What would you say to someone in that position? Like how would you approach someone in that position?
So the ironic thing is that students tend to be extremely guarded about those feelings. So they will hardly ever approach a dean of students and say, "Here's what I'm feeling." So one of the things that we do is I try to be as accessible as I can to students, face to face. Hey, how are you doing? And generally, it's a general discussion. How are you doing? How are you feeling? And that will lead to discussions. Well, it's my first week and I'm feeling very overwhelmed. And I like to peel back the layers. What is the overwhelm related to? And in your case, you might tell me, well, that first lecture was, I didn't understand anything that was going on. And so I might ask you some questions about those years off. Were you connected to study habits? Have you seen our learning specialists? Do you want to are you connecting with other student groups, peers that have signed up to assist other students? So I'd go through an entire list, but it really depends on the feedback of the student, how comfortable they feel sharing, number one, some of those feelings related to whatever it is, whether it's shame or fear or incompetence, so I actually will push the discussion. But the real challenge, Dr. Palmerton, is getting students to admit that you know, once they can admit it, we can have, I can take the discussion wherever they want it to go. And, for me, it is important to be as authentic as you can possibly be in that moment and meet the student where they're at. And the truth is, medical school isn't for everyone. It isn't the path that everyone feels comfortable taking. But I'm happy to really explore those discussions and really separate fear from anxiety from real issues with learning and grasping information and feeling comfortable with that decision.
So let's talk about that. So this really aligns with what it is that we see as well. People hire us to help students who want dramatic improvements in their scores. Either some students who are failing and need to do better in order just to pass, or some students who want to get like 260s because they want to get into something really competitive. One of the things that we find is that the things that hold students back are that oftentimes they're just not aware of. The biggest improvements come from seeing their blind spots. How does this sort of match with what it is that you're seeing on the ground?
I think it's actually parallel. It's very, very close because the spot can literally be anything. One such example is, you know what? I love art and I'm in medicine. What is that the true path for me? Or the blind spot could be that I'm very used to studying on my own. I was a straight A student in college. Now I'm in medical school feeling way out of touch. What is happening? And that's a really good sort of blind spot to just sort of negotiate because I like to tell students, no, nothing is happening. It's just that you've taken a leap into a graduate professional school that is extremely competitive with a lot to learn. And so now your study strategies have to change. They have to keep up with that change. You have to grow just a little bit more. But the blind spot could literally be anything. It could be also be social. We have a lot of students when they enter medical school are leaving home. And so who were in college, they were close to home, close to all their friends. All of a sudden, you get accepted to medical school, you're either way across the country in an apartment by yourself, and you've got this new social network that you've not yet connected with. And so I believe that There are no strict definitions to the blind spot. It's really authentically connecting to what is keeping you up at night, what is causing that anxiety, where does the stress come from, and then you can embark on some real conversation.
I love what you said about, I mean, all of it, but especially the part about kind of like reframing it, right? So it's like, I heard a phrase recently that was pressure is a privilege, right? And so it was like a championship team. They were talking like to their players of like, the fact that you feel this pressure is a privilege. And so kind of in the same way, I'm getting the sense of the fact that you are in this position and that you have to reframe the fact that you need to change your sort of study strategies, and that it's not about yeah, like just that fact is actually a privilege. It's a sign that you've kind of reached the next level. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it's spot on. I remember I read this book, and I forgive me on the title. I wish I could mention the title and the author, but I never forgot the message in this book, which was that for every level that you achieve, there's a certain growth that you have to achieve with it. And we oftentimes assume that, okay, yeah, I finished college, I did all this great work, and so boom, I've arrived, I'm done. No, actually, you're just beginning. And so that is what feeds the whole term of lifelong learning. That your learning really doesn't end. In order to keep growing, you have to consistently challenge yourself to get to the next level. And so I think that that is spot on with regards to the reframing and always looking at yourself from a different perspective. And we don't have that perspective on our own. It often takes some sort of outside party or entity or activity to challenge us in that way. Like, oh, I'm in a new environment. Oh, there's something different I need to do. And that's completely okay. That's the end of the sentence. It's totally okay. That's what you're supposed to be doing.
What's an example of where you've seen that sort of mental reframe make a huge difference in a student's sort of trajectory or development?
I've seen it academically. We have had students who, as I mentioned, were perfect candidates for our medical school. They get into school and all of a sudden speed bump and struggling with some academics. And with the assistance of either another dean or myself, sort of started to look at preparation for examinations or programming differently, with that reframing in place after a few meetings or some review. Then all of a sudden they're off and running and doing much better. And oftentimes our team members will hear about, oh my God, this was so helpful. I'm so thankful. I'm here now. And then socially, sometimes, students are academically prepared for medical school, but not socially or maturely or not in a mature frame of mind. And so, even from orientation, we're sort of really looking at, okay, you've made it here. But now, in order to get into the frame of mind of becoming a physician, there are all new expectations around confidentiality, how you utilize your social media, what that's going to mean for you in the future, how you address one another, how do you address your professors, and it's work. When it's done right, students can really feel that, oh, I'm being assisted to embrace my future. My future starts now. And that's an important factor. You're not waiting for the future and the future. You actually have to start it now. And it's really about taking that on and fully embracing where you are. And it takes work, takes flexibility, it takes a little bit of humor, not to take yourself so seriously that there are things that may need to change. So all of the above.
That's super powerful. Yeah, we had a student once who, to reiterate your point, he had hit a speed bump. He'd failed step one, and literally, like, he took it so personally. Like, he of the mindset that, oh, what's wrong with me? He couldn't get out of bed. I still remember his mom actually had to bring him to the first
Wow.
consultation. Helped him reframe. Yeah, like, kind of needed that external, like, push to reframe it. Changed his approach. Sort of saw where he was struggling, and then within about 2 months, he went from failing to scoring a 92 on
Amazing.
his NBME, which is basically like going from the bottom 3% to the top 3% in about 2 months. And it shows just how powerful what it is that you're saying is. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
And
I want,
it's important because the human mind doesn't like change. That's our natural, that is our natural go-to. We like to stay where we are, especially if it's comfortable, especially if I've been successful in the past. I want to stay right here. And the reframing requires a little work outside of yourself.
talk to us more about that. What does that mean? Like, people don't like change. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's human nature after observing so much. I think it is a part of human nature to, once they are comfortable in a particular setting or with a way of doing things, for them to stay in that mind frame because it feels good, right? I achieved this, I did this. Why would I change that? And then when the environment changes or the rules change, it becomes challenging to the person because now I'm not the person in the room who knows the answer. I have to do more work. And so it presents for the person who takes it personally, it presents a real challenge of strength to move outside of themselves and say, you know what, the goal here is to be successful, not for me to prove that I'm right. The goal here is for me to be successful, not for me to lay in this bed of I'm not good enough and self pity, right? So it takes action to get up and say, okay, I'm going to try something else. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to develop the strength to move forward beyond this barrier. Um, so it's work. Change requires work and flexibility. And human nature has a hard time with that. Is the best way I could say.
That's fascinating. Well, talk to me more about self-actualization. So we talked about this off camera. So you've spoken about helping students not just succeed academically, but also grow into who they're meant to become.
Right.
What does self-actualization look like in the context of medical education?
Um, Self-actualization is really owning who we are, and understanding our goals for getting to where we want to go. And that requires a few steps. Sometimes it's very easy for people to assume, Dr. Palmerton, you rolled out of bed and you were successful and had a successful podcast. When in reality, there probably were 100 steps that you took to get from point A to point Z. And when students are developing themselves in medical education, a part of the development requires that they come to that understanding as well, that you keep putting one foot in front of the other, acquire the skills, you show up every day. If you continue to consistently do what needs to be done, you will get to the point of getting your license and becoming this specialist in whatever area. And that it's a process. So self-actualization really, it takes work, but it's really more of a process of consistency, and believing that you will get there someday. And removing the sort of inappropriate thought that it needs to happen immediately, or that it happened immediately for that person, or that there's something wrong if you do not come away with your development um, in a fast and furious fashion. So it's slow and steady, win the race, and continuously showing up as you need to be. So a lot of students sometimes they need to figure out who they're going to be. They have interest in medicine, but where their specific specialty is going to take them, they don't know yet. And that's okay too, to develop that sense of exploration. Ooh, I went here, I tried it, I did like it. I would like to do more. Whereas some students come in already knowing addiction medicine was where it's going to be for me. And I'm going to continuously take step after step to get me to that point. Um, so I think that's really my overall thought on self-actualization is it's a process of development, but you have to be willing to really take yourself through those levels.
So I think I'm getting there's kind of like two parts. There's like the knowing what you want, and then like putting in the consistency and the work that you need to get there. Is that right?
Agreed. I would agree with that. Yes.
So let's start with like how is it that someone would know what it is that they want? Obviously, there are some people who just seem to know
Yeah.
like I want to do addiction medicine, but for the rest of I would say like the majority of medical students who come in not really knowing what it is that they want to do, what's the best way for them to figure out what the end target is going to be?
Exactly. And I want to say, by the way, that that's okay. I did not know that I would end up in higher ed administration. I discovered it as a talent and as a love and interest. Sometimes you know from the beginning, and other times you have to explore. And thankfully, the way that medical education is structured, it allows students to go on different rotations in the clinical years to actually be in that environment and really understand, ooh, OBGYN had a lot to offer. And I can see myself being a gynecologist or pediatrician or family physician or surgeon. Wait, you name it, dermatology. I mean, I think that's the beauty about the clinical years is that if you don't know yet, there's ample opportunity to really discover it in real time with people who are on your team. And most students come away sort of understanding, you know what, I really love that rotation. I think this is where it's going to be for me. So, I think I don't know if I completely answered your question, but the discovering our talents sometimes requires us to be open and vulnerable to the fact that you don't know yet and that you're going to have to explore and learn from the people around you and really listen and really be present in the moment. So you come away with some sort of idea of where do I think I belong.
Interesting. So it sounds like it's an active process. It's not just something that like we will fall into. We've got to there's it's kind of reframing it. Like you've got to put in a lot more work than you expect.
I believe so. I mean, in order for it to really stick with you. So, a lot of times you think you understand the way a particular field of medicine works, and then you get to that rotation, and it's like, wow, this I don't think this is as connected to me as I thought it would be. Whereas you go to another one and automatically you walk through the door, you're like, oh, I can be an emergency medicine starting, a medicine physician starting tomorrow. Sometimes it happens that quickly. Other times, you do have to journal a little bit, self-reflect, take some time to really think about your needs, your wants, your desires, and really, what are you good at? You can evaluate that in real time as you are going through your academic process and really forming a connection with what you're doing. Most of the time, it happens on that pathway. And for those who still struggle, there are thankfully we live in a country now. We have the resources where there are actual coaches now, professional coaches who can help guide someone with a little bit more structure to where they need to go.
in medicine specifically?
And I know all the ones I know are in the general population, but I can imagine that there's nothing about medicine where that could not be transferred. Because professional coaches, what they do is they make you look at yourself, right? It's about self exploration and going deeper and asking some of those tough questions. And I can see that being applied in that scenario as well.
What would you tell to someone? One of the challenges now that step one is pass fail, there is obviously more of an emphasis on step two, but there's also a huge emphasis on research. And so what we see now more and more is students really sort of starting earlier on in their career, trying to get more and more research. What would you tell to someone who is potentially interested in particularly competitive specialties if they wanted to self-actualize potentially towards one of the more competitive specialties?
Well, as it relates to research from the very beginning, when you start medical school, and if you are planning a route towards a very competitive specialty, make sure you're paying attention to the school guidance on how that works. So, what I mean by that is there is a rubric for competitive specialties, meaning there's a certain uh, score panel that they're looking for, a certain amount of experiences, a certain amount. So paying attention to what it will take to get you there, number one, is important. Number two, connecting with your faculty advisor or anyone who's in the position to provide access to research, student research, so you can get involved early. Really paying attention to all the things that they have laid out are important for students to develop in. And if you have academically, if you have extra time beyond your academics, really putting your energy towards building up your skill set. And I think those types of activities consistently will get you to that point. I have seen students in year one seek out their advisor just to talk about, well, how can I progress in this area? I'm interested in dermatology. What would I need to do to get to that particular goal? I have also seen students though go through their first year, never meet their advisor. So that is what you do not want to do, right? You want to get connected very early on, and really ask the questions, really take advantage of what is being offered to you. It's being offered to you for a reason, right? And the guidance that's being provided by the clinical department, especially as you prepare for match, is being provided for a reason. So, you kind of you really have to prepare, but also get engaged with your environment within your medical school. Pay attention to what they're saying, what is being sent, or what is being shared with students, I should say. Did that
One of the
answer your
be-
question?
I think so. Yeah. So I want to dig more into that. So they say that one of the best ways to be successful is to look at, like, imagine what it would take to be not successful and do the opposite. So
Yeah,
I want to dig more into that. So you were saying some students will just not talk to their advisors at all.
right.
What are other things that students could do that would basically guarantee that they would be not successful, so that the rest of us can learn from that and just do the opposite?
Correct. So love that question. So what a few things. So the reason why I brought up the example about not connecting with their advisor is that when it comes time for recommendation letters, guess who you have to ask? Your faculty advisor. So if you've been in the school for an entire year, they've never met you, never met, had a conversation, that recommendation letter is going to be a little bit more problematic. The other thing not to do is not asking for help. So again, in the example that I provided, students who are extremely capable, who have been straight A students in college, you get to medical school in your first semester and you don't reach out to the tutoring department or the learning specialist to say, I don't know what's going on here, but my performance is not what I'm used to. What can I do different? That is a killer. Sitting on it because of shame, because of you don't have that kind of time. Believe it or not, medical school is 4 years. It goes by very quickly. First semester, very quickly. First year, and you don't have that kind of time because you need to be building on your academic record to get to that glorious day of matching and graduation. So you really got to pull yourself out of whatever you're in very quickly. So really reaching for the help that is being offered to you. If you're having a problem and sitting on it, not saying anything, not taking advantage, very. The third example is, and I want to um, brace this by saying that family is extremely important. Um, the family structure is important, and we understand that you're coming with a life. However, medical school really is a sacrifice in terms of time and energy, and you have to recognize that all your time is needed in order to give it your all, give it your best. One of the critical mistakes that I've seen students do is socializing, whether it be with friends or family, the way that they did in college. That won't work in medical school. You don't have time every weekend to do whatever, whether it's take someone shopping or a family member shopping or to hang out with the friends. You've got an exam on Monday morning and you've got to do your best. So that's also sort of a bit of a misstep. Students not preparing well for that transition in their schedule. Um, that's that is also a killer. Um, and then not recognizing the another big one. It's sort of it's a hidden curriculum. So this isn't something that's everyone talks about, but people are very aware. Is they're not completely understanding how important their professionalism is to the way they are viewed as potential future team members, potential future leaders. And so if you are in medical school thinking, whatever, I'm going to do what I want to do and then I'll shape up when it's time to match, problematic, problematic. Because people will remember that, oh my God, we did our best here. But this person was always very combative, very, you know, just extremely rebellious and unable to negotiate with. Those types of things are really remembered by, even when you're on a clinical rotation and a program director is silently observing your potential for them, for you to become a team member. And so students sometimes forget that really this is the higher level, that you can't just mouth off on anyone and, well, we can sweep it under the rug. You really have to be more cognizant of how you show up in the world because you're steps away from becoming a physician. And so now the stakes are higher. The reality of your situation requires you to show up in a much more mature, involved, engaged, and mature way.
I knew someone at Harvard MGH who he would always he was very good at kind of breaking things down, and he was kind of a complaint, but he was kind of a complainer. And so he was eventually hired at MGH, but then like always seemed to get like the worst jobs. Is that the kind of like I'm kind of getting the sense of, there's an institutional memory. These worlds are small. You have to be careful about how it is that you present yourself because there's going to be a long memory for how it is that you're acting. Is that the sense I'm getting?
Yes, it's very similar in the sense. Now, it doesn't mean that we all don't have our individual personalities. What I'm talking about are really extreme things where you know that you show up in a difficult manner or in an immature manner. And what's happening is you're relying on people around you for recommendation letters. When you go on rotations, you're working within a very small team. So that program director really, really sees you. You're not one of 35. You may be now one of five. And so the behaviors, most students know, right? Are not really helping you advance. It's to your benefit to start to understand those behaviors, unpack them, and figure out better ways to achieve your goal, right? So, one of the things that we do is we talk about communication, professional communication. So, you're in medical school, you can't send emails like, yo, can I get an answer today? That doesn't work. Or I sent you an email an hour ago. How come you haven't responded? That sounds very extreme, and I'm doing that on purpose. It's because there are times when people are not thinking about the bigger picture. So we actually talk about, now that you're in medical school, we'd love for your signature to be professional, your full name, your class year, how someone can contact you. And we do a little bit of coaching around how do I approach Dr. Palmerton? Dr. Palmerton, I'd love to meet with you to discuss this research opportunity. And if you don't have time today, when would you be available? Right? Not, I need to see you today. Can you make that happen? That sort of tone of entitlement or the lack of patience. So I do a little bit of coaching around that because um, some students really don't have that level of connectivity to the professional world. And we understand that they've been going to school, to school, to school, right? It's been a long term trend of academic progress. But now, as you're getting closer to becoming a physician, we need to bring the professionalism into the world, right? To add to your skill set, excuse me.
Not everyone has a mentor like you, Dr. Dady. So, what would you recommend to people if they wanted to learn, like, what does it take to be more professional? What would be your recommendations on how it is that they could sort of cultivate those skills?
And I'm sorry I don't have a reading list with me. If I'd known, I would have brought some. But there are lots of resources out there in terms of if someone can read books. There are books on leadership and sort of cultivating success and working with different types of people. There are those books out there. There are also resources around how to professionally show up in a world. This is less to do about behavior, but more about the aesthetics that that your emails are crisp and get to the point and sort of are polite and really effective, that you show up well presented, that you understand what you want to say so that you're respectful of the mentor's time or the potential connection. There are plenty of resources. I would say do a little bit of search on Google. You can. We're lucky to have Google now, right? And there should be some things that come up around both presentation, but also verbal professionalism, as well as consistent behavior, right? Showing up on time, making sure you're following the school's regulations, but also the clinical sites regulations, um, and understanding teamwork. And medicine is a profession of people, right? And so you have to understand people to be successful with people. So you can start there, really making sure that your emotional IQ is where it needs to be, that you're every year, you're sort of ticking off a few boxes of skills that you want to enhance.
How important do you think your sort of professionalism and EQ have been in your professional success?
200%. Medicine, higher education, um, any profession that deals with people is all about relationships, cultivating them, creating win-win opportunities, being respectful, knowing when also not to engage. It's all about people. And so if you understand or you take the time to understand people, you will be successful. Takes a little bit more as well, but that is the core basis. Because I have to be the best I can be so I can give my best to my student. I have to be the best I can be so that I can give my best to my faculty, my dean, my staff. It's all important.
The reason I asked this question is because I've seen people that were exceptional at this. Like we had a student once who she was a non-US IMG, so she had like everything going against her. Somehow got a research position at the Harvard Mass Eye and Ear in ophthalmology. Had been basically told, like the chair had basically told her, like we will take you, just apply. And just having met her, it was so much. There was so much about her professional. Like, there's just something different about people that are excellent, like you are at professionalism. I'm curious to know. Again, I'm trying to figure out how best to ask this, but like, is there like one book that you would recommend? Is there one like, how did you get so good at this?
Oh, okay. I understand the question. And the answer is it wasn't just one thing.
Sure.
When I think about what makes me me, it's a combination of my faith, my upbringing, my experiences, my professional experiences beforehand, my reading list, my willingness to be flexible and learn, and then a core sense of motivation for it, right? A desire to do better, to want to be my best. So it's all of it. And it sounds like there should be some magical potion, but what I would say, it's just consistent work. So I include my faith in it because I think that what people need to understand is that the world, as well as academia, the workplace, isn't going to serve up everything that you want all the time. There are times where it may not be easy, and there are things that you may not be happy about. And you need a tool set to be able to not only be able to be a good leader, a good professional, but also a tool set to remain positive, so that you can give to others. So all of it is important. I think students, professionals need to be as flexible as they can be so that they can incorporate all of that. My anchor is my faith. However, for someone else, what keeps them centered, it might just be yoga, it might be regular exercise, it might be a sense of connectivity to nature. Whatever that is for you, you are going to need it, because the world of work, the world, as you can see, is can be chaotic. It's just not that easy to always show up your best self, but I put in the work. I am consistent. And I've used a multitude of things. I wish it were just one book, but it isn't. So I can be on my way to work and read a wonderful verse, in the Bible, and be inspired by that. Get to work, have a great conversation with my staff member, and be inspired by that. And then by noontime, there's a crisis we all have to handle, and I'm inspired by that. So you really have to be as flexible as you can be. um, I'm happy to share some books afterward. I can email you some ideas. But you know, uh, be flexible, be open. Um, but whatever you do, work at it.
I'm getting the same I'm getting the same kind of vibe as for the self-actualization. It's like you've got to know what it is that you want, right? So you have made it a goal of yours. Like you've recognized that like relationships are everything, and so you've made it your kind of goal to be the absolute best professional and sort of relationship builder and enhancer that you can be. And then second, I'm getting the sense of it takes a lot more work and flexibility and consistency than you would think, right? There's no silver bullet. There's only golden BBs, and you've just been kind of collecting those golden BBs over time, and then passing them on to the people that you mentor. Is that right?
I would say that's accurate. That's
Talk to me more about anchors. You mentioned the idea of anchors.
Mhm.
What do anchors look like for medical students under pressure, and why are they so important?
Oh, that's great. Especially as mental health has become increasingly important over the years. So I think anchors really are some of those examples, really a good nutritional sort of regimen, good sleep. Definitely people you can talk to when overly overwhelmed and stressed. So some connectivity there. Opportunities to reframe. That's important. When you get stuck, like, okay, what do I need to do to get myself back on track? Believe it or not, faith. We have a lot of students who have different faiths and maintain that consistent prayer and a regimen of sort of service. Um, Other things that medical student exercise is a big one. If I didn't mention sleeps, is also important. And then some consistent boundary maintenance. Medical students are bombarded, like all students, by social media, family demand, social demand, and you've got to really be um, aware of what your needs are versus what the external pressures are doing. So really maintaining your boundaries so that you can successfully meet your goals is another bit.
Let's take a step back. So, what would be the purpose of having an anchor in the first place? Is it to
Centered, to remain centered, to remain motivated, positive, encouraged, encouraged, especially when things get low. Um, and really just focused on the future. There are so many things that take our attention away from the set goal. If you look at current times, someone could say, if I watch the news, I'm going to automatically not want to leave my house. Right? It's so overwhelming, and so do you need all that screen time? What do you need? Maybe you just need some information for the next day or details for the week, but do you need to absorb it completely and totally? So really an anchor is just a fancy word for something that keeps you centered and just motivated in the most encouraged way. Because there are just a lot of challenges on our time, our energy, and our motivation right now.
kind of like going back to your framework for self-actualization, right? It's like you've got the goal, and then you've got to put in a lot of consistency and have flexibility and diligence. And so the anchor allows you to sort of maintain that. Is that right?
And maintain the endurance. Yes, it does.
How do you guide students to discover their own anchors?
That's a good one. And I don't know if I've ever guided anyone towards an anchor because it's so personal, right? Most of the students that I've met already have their anchor. They may need a few more, right? They may need one around, study strategies or things like that. But most students already have them. And I think if I met someone who didn't have an, we would start the conversation with, well, what do you want? And the student, let's say if we role play that, might say, I want more peace. I can't get a minute of study time. Well, that's a conversation about boundaries, and a conversation about how are you managing your boundaries where you're disturbed so much, right? And so we have to talk about, well, let's get around that. Let's get to the point. Who was disturbing the piece? Why? And how can we channel it differently? Um, and, I think I would pursue that process with whatever the issue is, but it really is authentically about where, what is the student showing up with? What kind of problem? And sometimes people don't know they need an anchor until they need it, right? So you're doing fine. All of a sudden, you fail an exam, and it's like, oh my God, the world is about to end. So now it's your first speed bump, and you don't know how to handle the stress and the pressure of that. And so now we need to talk about, well, you need some tools. So how are you going to manage the ups and downs of career academic progress? Because there are ups and downs. There are absolutely challenges and adversity. And so we need to discover, what can you do? What can get you back to center? And that's really, when I think about anchors in that way, um, it really is about that level of committing to what's going to get me back on track. Because I think that it's very easy to get thrown off, if you expect the world to be perfect, if you expect things to always go your way, and if you always expect to get the outcomes that you're working towards. And that is not the case. Failure is a part of success. Um, Disappointment is a part of success. And that might be surprising to a lot of students, especially the type of student who's always going and has always been successful. And so that's why we really need anchors, because you don't want to be thrown off track just because you encounter adversity.
What's one piece of unconventional advice that you have found has made the biggest difference for students' success or even your own success?
Interesting. Okay. I remember in the path towards my doctorate, I had a mentor who advised me that, Nadege, you're going to go through this process, and you're going to develop a thesis, and you're going to become extremely emotionally tied to it, which you do, by the way. So you're 100% correct. And you might encounter some pushback from your mentor to pare it down, make it more simple, and your immediate reaction will likely be, no, I don't want to, because you're so connected to what you have decided you want to do. And she advised me, she said, that is the opposite of what you should do. You need to follow your mentor's advice and get to success, get to the end. That's what's important. And then once you've completed your doctorate, you can pursue other roles and pursue other interests, or pursue that original topic that you wanted. But fight the urge to be combative in the moment, so that you can stick to your statement. And that was the best advice that I ever received, because I knew what to expect, and it made the process much easier on me, because it wasn't about me. What the mentor's role was really to guide me through the process so that we can get to success. And what that meant was, my big oversized thesis statement really needed to be pared down, because I was trying to do too much. I wanted to accomplish 10 things in that one paper. And the mentor was like, no, no, no. It- and I'm thankful for it. And on the other side, you're thankful because now you see, oh, okay, I understand why that didn't make sense. But as a student, sometimes in the moment, in the heat of the moment, as you are self-actualizing and becoming this doctor, da 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 da, you think you know it all, and you want to really stick to what you've set out for yourself. And sometimes it may not be the case. You need to be more flexible. You need to understand that there is a certain way to do things that will get you to your goals. And so that was the best advice. I really, because it was years before I had to do that. And I'm so glad that she said, no, prepare yourself for this. Every student goes through it. It's an emotional process. And, um, and I was just glad it made my process just that much easier. So I think students can really, learn from that. They can really understand that just, you know, follow what you need to follow to get from point A to point B. It can be a lot less stressful for you if you understand, um, what you need to in the moment, and not make it about you or what you want to accomplish so much as you need to cross the finish line. If that makes any sense.
What would be the med student equivalent of that? Like if you could talk to sort of people in the beginning or early on in their medical career, what would be the equivalent for them?
Um, Sometimes I think medical students, um, and it's because they're very intelligent. Most students at that level have a certain motivation about them, and they come into med school really wanting to change things overnight. And there can be an assumption that what more can you learn from a professor? And I would just say to be a little bit more humble that, there are things that you learn along the way that seem like big time wasters. I really understand that emotion, but it isn't. It's not in vain. You kind of have to build a sense of patience to really learn from the process. Learn as much as you can from the mentor who is standing before you, um, so that you can be very well informed in the future when you do embark on changing certain things within medical education. So you can fully learn, why was this there before? But I do feel like students are extremely um, committed to the technological advancements of things having to be done fast and quick and easy. And I don't think medicine runs that way. I think medicine is still very much a people. It's about people, and there are things you need to learn on that path.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dady, for sharing all of your many nuggets of wisdom and perspective. If people wanted to follow you, what would be the best way for them to do so?
I You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, so people can definitely reach out to me on any of those platforms. I do a little bit on LinkedIn. I post mostly about professional things that are happening. Instagram and Facebook, I incorporate a little bit more of the social. I did publish a book 2 years ago, so I have a space on Amazon as well. So any one of those is fine. I'm happy to answer, welcome sort of the interactions, answer questions, and really help people along, because I understand it's a complicated path, and people need a little bit more guidance than usual, because we're navigating a complicated world at the same time as they're navigating a complicated, you know, educational pathway. So
What's the title of your book?
the plan was a story about perseverance and promise.
That's excellent. And we can get this on Amazon?
Yes, it's on Amazon.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And what is your Instagram handle?
Dr. Nadege Dady.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, Dr. Dady, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And this was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.